tracking. And without further ado, I'll invite the first speakers, Peggy Newman and Jane Hunter, who I understand will be doing a double act in giving this talk. We have 20 minutes per slot.
So, good morning, everyone. It is a double act, a duet. I'm going to be giving the sort of executive overview, and then Peggy will be actually delivering the real work and the meat of the sandwich, you might say. So, there's quite a few people who've been involved in this project because it's a collaboration between the e-research lab within the School of ITEE and the Eco Lab at the University of Queensland. And the Eco Lab is run by Professor Craig Franklin, and he's an ecologist at the University of Queensland, but he also works with Hamish Campbell, who's a postdoc there. Matthew Watts works in the Ecology Centre run by Hugh Possingham at UQ. He's an expert in statistical analysis. And then Peggy is a software engineer within the UQ e-research lab. So I'm going to cover, first of all, background and objectives of the work, describe some related work. Peggy's then going to come on and describe the web interface and the functionality that she's developed, the architecture and the data model that will interest the technical people in the audience. And then I'll talk about the evaluation challenges, future work and conclusions. So, a little bit about the background. Turn this around here, I can see better. Oops, shouldn't have done that. Is that back on again? Okay. All right. Okay, so oztrack is actually an ANDS data capture project, which, as I've already mentioned, is a collaboration between the UQ e-research lab and the Eco Lab at the University of Queensland. And what the Eco Lab are doing is that they're spending an enormous amount of their research effort in tagging particular species, marine species, terrestrial species and avian species. And they're tagging them using telemetry devices, and there's a whole range of different telemetry devices, acoustic devices, radio devices, archival pop-up devices, pop-up archival tags, which are called PATs, and then GPS satellite tracking tags. And what they're doing is they're monitoring animal movements over time, but it's generating very high frequency data of those animal movements. And they're doing that because they want to be able to understand the impact of environmental changes on animal behaviour. They also want to be able to support decisions being made with regard to environmental management. But there's also a number of groups within Australia who are tagging and monitoring particular invasive species, for example, cane toads, to understand the rate of spread of these invasive species, where they're heading, that kind of thing, and how they can control them. So, I know there's an awful lot of text on this slide, but that's deliberate. Because I just want to show you the number of different projects that are doing this kind of work. And yet they're all using their own separate data management techniques. They're all storing their data on their laptops or on their own servers. There's no sharing the data across many of these projects. But they're also not sharing the tools that they're using to analyse the data sets. And that's one of the key objectives of this project. So there's a UQ Eco Lab, who we're working with, and they're tracking crocodiles, turtles, bull sharks, cassowaries and Cape York. The CSIRO Ocean Tracks project, and they're tracking tuna, swordfish, sharks at Ningaloo Reef. The Department of Environment and Resource Management in Queensland are monitoring turtles in Moreton Bay and along the east coast of Australia. Project Manta, which is both, I think it's Lady Elliot Island and off Stradbroke Island, are tagging and tracking manta rays. ATAMS, which is funded through IMOS, are tracking inshore and offshore fish, sharks and marine mammals. University of Tasmania, where the Antarctic Wildlife Research Unit is located, are tracking penguins, seals and whales between Antarctic and subantarctic waters. School of Biological Sciences, University of Sydney, they're the ones who are tracking invasive species. And then at Biosecurity Queensland, they've recently funded a large project there where they're tagging and monitoring fruit bats to try and understand better the spread of things like Hendra virus and Lyssa virus. Oh, and finally, The sorts of tools and technologies that we're using here are also applicable to monitoring of livestock in the agricultural domain. And I know the University of New England are tagging and monitoring cattle, so they have a better understanding of optimising grazing lands. So what are our objectives? Firstly, well, fairly common objective, but to enable upload of data sets to a common online species tracking repository. And this is both to facilitate data sharing, reuse and access, but also to encourage good data management practices. So they'll have collection registration, they'll have specific curation and metadata services, and then they'll have automated backup and hosting and support and maintenance. So that's number one, the hosting and sharing of the data. But number two is to provide access to a common mapping interface and the common geostatistical analysis tools. So there's search, retrieval and visualization services, map-based representations of animal movement over time and space, reprojection of the location data into the local coordinate systems. And then once you get all the data in there, you want to be able to analyse it and calculate for a particular animal, what's the home range of that animal. And so these tools allow you to do that. You then want to be able to compare home ranges of different animals. You want to be able to understand if that animal's home range or a group of animals' home ranges is shifting over time, how that compares with the already calculated species distributions, and does it indicate that those species distributions are shifting over time due to environmental or climate change parameters. And then finally, we want to be able to support spatiotemporal querying, such as give me all the crocodiles that have crossed this region. So you can draw a box or you can have a polygonal area and you want to know which animals live in that area or at least cross that region. So the workflow, Peggy's probably going to go into this in a second, but the user collects data from the transmitters and the tags. They go onto their local desktop workstation. They then upload those raw CSV files into our oztrack repository. Peggy will describe the architecture. And then we support a whole lot of statistical analysis and visualization and animation services on top of that. So the challenges that we've got, scalability and volume, probably influencing some of the scientists' attitudes towards data sharing, providing long-term storage, and the problems there are common across many projects, persistent URIs for animals in particular, and sustainable business models. So who's going to support and host this in the future? The data sets can have highly heterogeneous spatial and temporal scales, the different file formats. We support CSV for the raw data, but we want to be able to integrate other environmental data sets, so such as climate data, such as land use data, and overlay that with the animal tracking data. And then finally, developing these predictive models of shifting species distributions is a major challenge that we need to be able to provide the infrastructure to support that. Related work, there's a number of projects, in particular MoveBank and OverCMap are two that we've been, developing our system based on information from those projects there. And you can, go online and find those. But the difference between what we're providing and what they're providing is that we actually provide statistical analysis tools on top of the data capture and the mapping interface. And neither of these projects actually provide those tools. So, Peggy.
Hello, everyone. I'll start right now with the homepage at oztrack.org. Excuse me. It's pretty scant at the moment. It's still very much in its infancy. The idea of the homepage is that we'll get an overview on a map with an icon or something representing each project that's in oztrack. So part of the deal with oztrack is that a user can create a project. We'll have get a centroid point or the middle of the spatial data that's supplied with the project and a little bit of a hover or click event that'll give the user a bit of information about the project. So hopefully on the homepage we can give an immediate sense of the number of projects that are available in oztrack and the variety and breadth of animals. Like James said, the Echo Lab that we've been working with, we can start oztrack's life with a number of different animals and animal tracking projects from over the years. A project is the logical concept that we're working with. There's two important things about projects here. First of all, when trackers create projects here, our metadata is captured on a form on this form here, and ANZ, our funding body, will eventually get that project metadata and add it to its collection registry, giving that project extra visibility, if you like, in the research environment. The drop-down box here that you can see describes a few different types of projects, and the type of project is really important because it will determine the type of data that oztrack expects to be uploaded when the user gets around to uploading, and also the type of analysis tools that are available to them, because they're all telemetry, but they vary a little bit in the data types and the types of analysis you should do. So GPS telemetry is where you have an animal with a collar or a tag, and that collar or tag collects a lat and long and a timestamp in a set time interval. Or you could have passive acoustic telemetry, is a slightly different thing again, where you have commonly an aquatic environment, you would have a receiver in the water and a tagged animal. When it comes within cooey of the receiver logs a hit, a timestamp, an animal ID, and the biologist collects that data from the receiver. And radio telemetry is another thing again, where there's no tagged animal at all, but there's a scientist will locate an animal and walk around taking lat longs and bearings, and will triangulate the position of the animal. So they're all slightly different data types that we need to deal with. I've got a screen here for uploading the data file, and what we're really trying to do here is make it as easy as possible and generic as possible for users to be able to upload their data. Often the files come as CSVs, and there's many different formats, but as you can see, it really is very similar in that it's a timestamp and some sort of location data. So I've just tried to make it so that they can upload their file, get feedback as to what might be wrong with the file, and keep trying until they get it to work. But it tries to handle all sorts of different time and date formats and lat long formats. This is just a screen where the users can look back at their data and check that it's loaded up okay, I guess. But this is really the main interface to the data. So we map it up for them. The animal tracks we are representing as trajectories. The trackers like to see the data that way. And it turns out that it's a lot more efficient in open layers to represent the data that way. If they would like to see all of their individual points as on a map, then there's the ability to download a KML file, which is animated and will give them all their timestamps and show them those individual data points if that's what they want to see. We work out the minimum distance for them, which is an important calculation. And I guess this is where the real magic happens. What we have here is a form where the user can choose a home range estimation algorithm that they'd like to apply to their data, and it's extensible. We can add a lot more of those. It runs off to a package called AD Habitat, which is a widely known and used, published against package, animal tracking package in R. And there's a number of different ways of applying a home range estimation to the data. So the user chooses one, just clicks the calculate button and open layers and web servers and do a bunch of stuff and send back a KML with a polygon representing their home range estimates for each animal and applies the right projection to come up with an accurate area calculation for the area that we're working in. Just quickly, I'll add that what the trackers really like about this so far is that they can filter by a date range, and this data set's fairly small, so it's difficult to, it's not like we can apply seasonal changes here, but you get the idea. We can compare one set of dates to another set of dates across home ranges, and looking at that is as simple, comparing them is as simple as using the check boxes to tick on and off for each individual animal and time period. And so that's quite user-friendly, I think, and useful. Just a quick look at the system architecture. Basically, we're using lots of GIS libraries and packages at almost all the levels, all except GeoServer, which we'll probably bring in eventually anyway. And lastly, our data model, and I guess the important things to take from this is that it's fairly simple. We have a many-to-many relationship between projects and users. We have our main data either is a position fixed type data set or an acoustic detection. Obviously, both of those are associated with a data file and both are associated with a particular animal, but it's just the acoustic detection that gets its location data from a receiver. And that's about it for me. Would you like to close off, Jane? Thanks.
Okay, so evaluation. We haven't done a detailed evaluation. We've just mainly got feedback from the users at this stage, and we want to deploy it more widely before we do a more detailed user evaluation. But basically, the feedback from the users is that they think it's, improved their ability to analyse the data significantly. So it's made it much easier, much faster for them to generate these kinds of visualizations and analyses than previously. It handles multiple data formats. They like that. It provides them with immediate access to the analysis tools, and it's all open source software. Now the cons, I'll talk about those. One is probably the scalability issue. I'll talk a little bit about that. And then if we want to be able to do it in real time. So to be able to stream from the sensors or the receivers directly to the repository and then visualize it almost in real time and generate those animations as well. So future work is tackling the scalability, so supporting a large number of users and large data sets, integrating an AAF layer, so there's authentication, authenticated sharing of the data and access control mechanisms, integrating taxonomic names for the species, because if we want to support all those other projects, there's a lot of species involved, generating unique IDs for the animals, incorporating related environmental data sets, such as Bureau of Meteorology climate data, water quality data, sea surface temperature data, land use data. We want to improve the visualization and animation functionality, integrate a Facebook page to support community discussions and build up that community rapport, enable overlay of data from multiple species or multiple animals, develop the predictive models for how the species distributions change over time. And all of this work, I'm just putting in a plug, we've got a Nectar e-research tool application to do some of this work. And I just wanted to finish on this diagram. So this is a PhD student who's doing some more advanced analyses of data that we're capturing, where they're attaching accelerometers to the crocodiles. And what she's doing is taking large corpuses of this accelerometry data, which collects X, Y, and Z values for the crocodiles, and she's taking a large collection manually, as whether it's resting, whether it's diving, whether it's surfacing, whether it's sleeping, whether it's feeding, whether it's jumping. And then she's feeding that manually tagged corpus into a machine learning algorithm, which then automatically tags the remainder or new streams as they come in, and she's getting very good precision for automatically tagging of these streams. And for ground truth, she's got videos of these crocodiles because they're filming them within the Australia Zoo, and so she's able to compare her tagging with the ground truth. So to conclude, I think it's having a significant impact on sharing and reuse. It's reducing the cost, the time and the effort. We're providing greater access to better analytical tools, improved quantification of the species distribution patterns. But in the longer term, it's going to improve our understanding of the impact of the environment on particular species, in particular threatened species, and it's going to improve our understanding of the rate and extent of movement of invasive species. And if you have any questions, there's some websites and email. But gathering from the way Richard's waving that sign at me, I think we might be out of time for questions.
I guess I have time just for one question, if anybody has any.
Yes.
Just wondering what the academic concerns might be with sharing their data. I know there's always
Yeah, so with Craig Franklin's group, they have a lot of legacy data that they've already published, and so they have no qualms about sharing that now. But the current research that they're doing, that they haven't published yet, they'd like to restrict access to that until they've published it, and then they want a link to that. They want to publish it, make it available, and have links to that from their publication. Yeah? So they're at a stage where they've got quite a significant corpus that they can publish now. Okay.
Okay, thanks to the speakers. We'll have a